The day had started like any other outside the tall gates of Buckingham Palace. The sun was soft and warm, spreading golden light across the grand courtyard, and tourists from many countries stood gathered with cameras ready. They wanted to see the Royal Guards march, with their tall bearskin hats, their sharp uniforms, and their serious faces. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, pointing with wide eyes while adults whispered to one another about the history of the place. The air was filled with excitement and respect, for this was a sight many had traveled long distances to witness. Among the crowd stood a family of 4. The parents were gentle and kind-looking, and beside them was their daughter who held tightly to her mother's hand. In front of them sat young Oliver, a boy of only 10 who moved around in a wheelchair. His dark hair was neatly brushed, and his small hands gripped the wheels tightly as he looked ahead with eyes full of wonder. Though he was small in size, his heart was big, filled with dreams and hopes that often seemed unreachable. For as long as he could remember, Oliver had been unable to stand or walk. Doctors had told his parents that his legs were too weak, and though treatments had been tried, his life was mostly lived from the seat of his chair. But Oliver was not sad on this day. He had always loved the Royal Guards. He admired their uniforms, the way they stood so tall and straight, and the discipline that kept them silent and strong. To him they were symbols of courage, like living statues that never wavered. His eyes followed their every move, and in his heart he whispered a wish. He wished he could stand tall just once like them. He did not tell his parents this dream because he did not want to hurt them, but his soul longed for that single moment of dignity. As the guards marched, the sound of boots hitting the ground echoed across the courtyard. The tourist fell silent, watching with awe. The guards' steps were sharp and perfectly timed, as though one heartbeat guided them all. Among them was a man named Thomas, tall and broad, with eyes that seemed more aware than most. Though his face was trained to remain firm, his heart was softer than his duty allowed him to show. He scanned the crowd with the quick glance of a professional, but when his eyes rested on Oliver, something inside him stirred. Oliver's gaze was different from the others. While most people looked at the guards with curiosity or admiration, Oliver's eyes carried longing so deep that Thomas felt it in his chest. He noticed how the boy leaned forward in his chair, how his lips parted in amazement, and how his small hands pressed against the armrests, as if his body wanted to rise even though his legs could not obey. In that instant, Thomas remembered his own childhood. He too had once been weak and unsure, mocked by others for stumbling when he tried to walk. But he had grown strong, with years of effort and encouragement from someone who believed in him. That memory returned to him as he looked at Oliver, and he knew he could not let this day pass like any other. The rules of the Royal Guard were strict. They were not to move unless commanded, not to show emotion, and not to break formation for any reason. Their silence and strength were traditions that went back hundreds of years. Yet Thomas felt that tradition alone could not outweigh the silent cry of a child's heart. He tightened his grip on his rifle, fighting the instinct to remain still, but then slowly, almost against his own training, he took a step forward. The crowd gasped. Cameras were lowered. Murmurs ran through the line of tourists, for it was rare to see a guard move out of order. All eyes followed Thomas as he broke formation, his polished boots clicking softly against the stone path. His fellow guards stayed firm, but he alone approached the edge of the crowd toward the small boy in the wheelchair. Oliver's parents blinked in shock, unsure if they were about to be scolded for standing too close. His sister held onto their mother's arm tightly, her eyes wide with fear and awe. But then Thomas did something even more surprising. He bent down. He bent low enough so that his eyes met Oliver's, and suddenly the imposing guard was no longer a distant symbol of strength, but a man with a kind gaze. The boy froze, unsure if he was in trouble, but then Thomas's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, a smile meant only for Oliver. He spoke softly, his deep voice breaking the silence. "You like the guards, don't you?" Oliver's eyes widened. He had never expected a guard to speak to him, let alone notice him. His lips trembled, but he managed to whisper, "Yes, I want to be strong like you." The parents felt tears rise instantly. It was not only the words of their son, but the way he said them, with longing and honesty that tore at their hearts. They had always known Oliver dreamed of walking, but hearing him speak his wish aloud was like a knife wrapped in love. His mother pressed her hand against her mouth, trying not to sob, while his father placed a steadying arm around her shoulders. Thomas studied the boy's face for a moment. In that instant, he understood more than Oliver had said. He saw a child who dreamed of dignity, who wanted more than pity. Thomas remembered his own father's words. True strength isn't in the legs, it's in the heart. But sometimes the heart teaches the body what it can do. The words echoed within him, urging him to act. The crowd grew hushed. It was as if the entire world had paused to witness the meeting between a boy in a wheelchair and a royal guard who had chosen compassion over protocol. Even the other guards, though unmoving, seemed to sense that something sacred was unfolding. Thomas placed one hand gently on Oliver's small shoulder. His eyes were steady, full of encouragement. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly. Oliver blinked. He had never been asked such a question by a stranger, especially by someone who looked like a hero. Slowly, he nodded. The parents exchanged a glance torn between fear and hope. They did not understand what Thomas planned to do, but in his eyes they saw no danger, only sincerity, only kindness. With a trembling breath, Oliver's mother whispered, "We trust you." The guard gave a single nod, then leaned closer to Oliver, his voice so quiet that only the boy and his family could hear. "Then today, let's see how strong you really are." The words hung in the air, simple but powerful. Oliver's heart pounded in his chest. His hands clenched the armrests of his wheelchair as a strange mixture of fear and excitement surged through him. For the first time in his life, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than his weakness. And with that promise, a spark was lit, not only in the heart of a boy, but in the soul of everyone watching. The moment was no longer about guards and tourists. It was about courage, kindness, and the beginning of something that would leave an entire family in tears. Thomas stayed kneeling beside Oliver, his tall figure creating a strange picture against the backdrop of the palace gates. His uniform was perfect, his face serious yet gentle, and his presence seemed larger than life. For Oliver, it was as if the world had shrunk to this one moment where only he, his family, and the guard existed. The boy's heart beat fast, his small hands tightening on the armrests of his wheelchair, uncertain of what was coming next. The tourists surrounding them were whispering softly, yet nobody dared to interrupt. They had all come to watch a ceremony, but now they were witnessing something much more powerful, something no guidebook or travel pamphlet could have prepared them for. The silence around them was filled with unspoken questions. Why had the guard broken tradition? What was he going to do? And why did he seem to care so deeply about this one small boy? Thomas leaned a little closer, lowering his voice so it would not carry too far. "Do you know why we stand so tall and still?" he asked Oliver. Oliver shook his head, his eyes locked onto the guard's face. "It is not because we have no fear," Thomas said softly. "It is because we have courage. Courage means standing even when it is hard. Courage means not running away from challenges. You don't need a uniform to have courage, Oliver. You already have it inside you." The boy blinked rapidly, unsure if he should believe those words. He had always thought of courage as something other people had. The athletes, the soldiers, the guards who never wavered no matter how many eyes watched them. But now this man was telling him that courage could belong to him too. Oliver's parents exchanged glances, their hearts tightening. They could see the change in their son's expression, the spark of hope beginning to flicker in his eyes. His mother had often prayed for someone, anyone, to look at Oliver and see more than just a boy in a chair. And here, in the middle of London, a stranger in a red uniform and tall black hat had done just that. Thomas slowly extended his hand, his white glove gleaming in the light. He didn't rush or pressure Oliver. He simply offered, waiting patiently. "Would you like to show everyone how strong you are?" he asked gently. Oliver looked down at the hand, his chest rising and falling quickly. His mind was racing. What if he tried and failed? What if his legs gave out and he fell in front of all these people? He imagined the embarrassment, the disappointment. He lowered his gaze, afraid, but Thomas did not pull his hand back. He kept it there, steady like a lifeline. His voice remained calm. "Strength isn't about never falling," he said. "It's about trying even when it's hard. If you stumble, I'll be here. And if you take even one step, it will be yours forever." Those words sank deep into Oliver's heart. He remembered all the times he had seen other children running, playing football, jumping high. He had always been the one sitting and watching. But now he had a chance, maybe just a small one, but a chance. His mother bent close, her eyes filled with tears. "You can try, my love. We are here with you," she whispered. His father nodded, his strong hand squeezing Oliver's shoulder gently. The little boy lifted his eyes again, and this time he placed his small hand into Thomas's gloved one. It felt firm and safe, like the hand of a giant holding the hand of a knight. The tourists around them held their breath, sensing that something important was about to happen. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Even the sound of traffic on the distant street seemed to fade. Thomas looked into Oliver's eyes and gave a small nod. "Good, now take your time. Don't think of the crowd. Think of your heart. Think of standing tall even for just a moment." The boy shifted in his chair, his arms trembling slightly as he prepared to push against the armrests. His legs, weak and untested, felt heavy as stone. Sweat formed on his forehead from the effort even before he had moved. His sister, standing beside their mother, covered her mouth with her hands, whispering, "He's going to try." Oliver's first attempt was shaky. His arms trembled so much that he sank back into the chair almost instantly. A wave of frustration washed over him, and his eyes filled with tears. "I can't," he whispered, but Thomas's hand didn't move away. His voice remained calm and steady. "You can," he said firmly. "Not because your legs are strong, but because your heart is. Don't think of what you cannot do. Think of what you want. Stand for yourself, Oliver. Just try again." The boy sniffled and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. His father knelt beside him now, his own arm wrapping around Oliver's back. "I've got you, son," he said softly. "We will hold you until you are ready." Encouraged, Oliver tried once more. This time he pushed harder, his arms straining, his body trembling. Slowly, so slowly, he began to lift from the seat. His knees shook, his ankles wobbled. But with Thomas's steady grip and his father's supportive hold, Oliver rose an inch higher, then another. Gasps spread through the crowd. Cameras clicked, not in a frenzy but in reverence, as though each person wanted to capture a miracle without disturbing it. A woman in the crowd dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man whispered to his wife, "He's standing." Oliver's chest heaved as he fought for balance. His legs felt like they might crumble beneath him, yet they held, weak but willing. He was standing. For the first time in his life, he was truly standing. His mother fell to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face as she reached for his hands. "You're doing it, Oliver. You're really doing it." The boy's lips quivered, but slowly a smile spread across his face. His eyes shone with pride, disbelief, and joy all mixed together. He had thought it impossible, but here he was, on his own 2 feet, supported by love and courage. The moment stretched like a golden thread, binding everyone present. The tourists forgot about the palace, the guards, the ceremony. All they saw was a boy taking his first steps toward hope, guided by a soldier who had chosen kindness over duty. Thomas straightened slightly, though he still held Oliver steady. "See?" he whispered. "You are stronger than you know." Oliver's body trembled, but instead of sitting back down, he leaned forward, shifting one shaky leg ahead of the other. It was not graceful or quick, but it was movement. It was a step. His first step, his family gasped in unison. His mother covered her mouth again, overwhelmed by emotion, while his father's eyes filled with tears he could no longer hold back. His sister clapped her hands to her chest, her little voice crying out, "He did it!" The boy stood there, shaky but proud, his smile growing wider by the second. And though his legs could only carry him so far, in that moment he was taller than anyone else in the courtyard. The royal guard had given Oliver more than a chance to stand. He had given him belief, the most powerful gift of all, and as Oliver's family held him, crying tears of joy, the crowd around them began to applaud softly, not out of habit but out of respect for the courage they had just witnessed. Oliver's small hand gripped Thomas's gloved one with all the strength he had. His body trembled, but his spirit was stronger than ever before. He had done something he thought would never be possible. He had stood. Now, with his family around him and the eyes of strangers upon him, he faced an even greater test. The thought of taking a step filled him with both excitement and fear. The courtyard was quiet except for the faint sound of birds above and the distant hum of city life. The crowd had forgotten everything else. Cameras hung useless around people's necks because no one wanted to miss a single moment by looking through a screen. All attention was locked on the small boy in the wheelchair, who now stood with the help of a royal guard and his father. His legs shook, but his determination was stronger than his weakness. Thomas knelt slightly, steadying Oliver with his hand. His voice was calm and steady, like a captain guiding a ship through a storm. "You've done the hardest part, Oliver," he said softly. "You've stood tall. Now let's see if you can take a step forward." Oliver looked up at him with wide eyes. His lips parted, but no words came out. His chest rose and fell quickly, as if each breath carried the weight of the world. "A step?" he whispered, doubt in his tone. "Yes," Thomas said firmly, his eyes filled with encouragement. "Just one. Don't think of it as walking. Think of it as showing yourself what you can do. Just move forward, even if it's small." His father leaned closer, whispering in Oliver's ear, "I'm here, son. If you fall, I'll catch you. But I believe you won't fall." Oliver's mother had tears flowing down her face as she crouched just in front of him. Her hands were open, ready to hold him the second he reached her. His sister stood by her side, eyes bright with hope, whispering, "Come on, Ollie, you can do it." The boy swallowed hard. His legs trembled under his weight, and fear whispered in his mind. What if I fall? What if everyone laughs? But when he looked into his mother's eyes, filled not with doubt but with love, and then at Thomas, who radiated calm strength, he pushed the fear aside. Slowly, painfully, Oliver shifted his weight onto one leg. His small foot wobbled as he tried to move the other. It felt like lifting a heavy stone, but he kept going. The crowd held its breath. Children in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide, while grown men pressed their lips together to stop themselves from crying. Then, with a shaky motion, Oliver lifted his right foot and placed it just ahead of the left. His entire body swayed, his knees bending dangerously, but Thomas's steadying hand kept him balanced. Gasps filled the air. His mother cried out softly, "That's it. That's it, my love." She reached out as if she could pull him forward with the force of her heart alone. Oliver's face lit up with a mixture of fear and joy. He had taken a step. It was clumsy, it was shaky, but it was his. His lips curved into a smile, and his small laugh broke through the silence, filling the courtyard like sunlight breaking through clouds. Encouraged, he tried again. His left leg moved this time, dragging slightly, but it moved forward. He leaned heavily against Thomas's support, but the step was real. 2 steps now. His father's eyes overflowed with tears, his strong shoulders trembling as he whispered, "That's my boy. That's my brave boy." The crowd could not hold back any longer. Soft claps began to spread among them, respectful and quiet at first, then growing as more people joined. Strangers who had never seen Oliver before were wiping their eyes. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others held their children closer, pointing and saying, "Look, remember this. This is courage." Oliver's mother was now openly weeping, her hands trembling as she waited for her son to reach her. She whispered through her tears, "Come to me, sweetheart. I'm right here." Oliver's small chest heaved as he pushed himself again. His arms stretched toward his mother as if her love itself was pulling him forward. His feet dragged, his legs bent awkwardly, but somehow, step by shaky step, he moved closer. Thomas's heart swelled as he supported the boy. He could feel Oliver's strength, not in his legs, but in his spirit. The boy's determination reminded him of his own struggles long ago. He had been told once that he would never be strong enough, never fit enough to serve. But someone had believed in him, and that belief had carried him to where he stood today. Now he was passing that gift to Oliver. Finally, Oliver stumbled into his mother's waiting arms. She caught him, pulling him close, sobbing with joy. She kissed his forehead over and over, her tears wetting his hair. "You did it, Ollie. You did it," she whispered through her sobs. His father bent down and wrapped them both in his arms. Even his sister leaned in, hugging tightly, her small face pressed against her brother's shoulder. For a moment they were all locked in one embrace, a family bound together by love and by the miracle they had just witnessed. The applause from the crowd grew louder, though still respectful, almost like a salute. Some guards standing nearby, though trained to remain stone-faced, felt their throats tighten. They could not break discipline, but their hearts swelled with pride for their comrade who had chosen humanity over protocol. Oliver, still held by his mother, looked up at Thomas. His smile was wide, his eyes glistening. "I walked," he said in a trembling voice filled with awe. Thomas's lips curved into the smallest of smiles as he saluted the boy. "You did more than walk, Oliver," he said softly. "You showed everyone what true courage looks like." The words sank deep. Not only for Oliver, but for every person standing in the courtyard that day. People would go home and tell the story of the little boy in the wheelchair, who took his first steps at the gates of Buckingham Palace, guided by the hand of a royal guard. And though many of them would show pictures and videos, none of those images could fully capture the power of what they had seen with their own eyes. The boy had taken steps, yes, but he had also stepped into the hearts of all who witnessed it. And the tears flowing from his family's eyes were not just tears of joy but tears of hope, proof that miracles can happen in the most unexpected places. Oliver's laughter echoed softly in the courtyard, and that small joyful sound carried more weight than the footsteps of the marching guards. His family still held him close, their faces wet with tears, but Oliver was not finished yet. Though his legs trembled, though every step felt like carrying the weight of the world, he wanted more. He wanted to prove not only to himself but to his family that he could keep going. Thomas straightened, still keeping one hand ready to support the boy. He leaned down slightly so only Oliver could hear. "Would you like to try again?" "You don't need to, but if you want, I'll walk right beside you." Oliver looked up at his mother, who was still holding him tightly. Her tearful eyes met his, and for a second she feared letting go. She didn't want him to get hurt. But she also didn't want to stop him from reaching for his dream. She brushed his hair back gently and whispered, "Do you want to try, my love?" The boy nodded, his lips curling into a shy but determined smile. "I want to," he said softly. His father's hand rested firmly on his back. "Then let's do it together," he encouraged. The crowd hushed again, waiting in awe as the family prepared to let Oliver try walking another few steps. It was as though the world itself had paused, holding its breath for this fragile miracle. Thomas stepped back just enough to give Oliver space while still keeping his arm ready to steady him. The boy pushed gently against his mother's arms, straightening his shaky legs again. His knees bent dangerously at first, but then with a deep breath he stood tall once more. The crowd erupted into soft applause again, moved by the sight. Some people pressed their palms together in prayer. Others wiped tears from their eyes. A tourist in the back whispered, "I'll never forget this as long as I live." Oliver lifted one foot forward. His body wobbled, but he caught himself. Then he moved the other. Step after step, he shuffled slowly across the stone path, his family walking beside him like a protective shield. His mother crouched close, her arms half extended, ready to catch him at any moment. His father stayed steady on the other side, and Thomas walked just behind, tall and strong, his gloved hand hovering near the boy's shoulder. Every step was greeted with gasps, sighs, and soft claps from the crowd. The atmosphere felt heavy with emotion. It wasn't about a royal palace anymore, or about guards and traditions. It was about one boy proving to himself that he could do what seemed impossible. Oliver's small face glowed with joy. His cheeks were flushed, and though sweat beaded on his forehead, his smile never faded. Each step seemed to add years of strength to him, as if his body was learning something new with every movement. His little sister skipped alongside him, unable to contain her excitement. "Look at you, Ollie. You're really walking," she cheered, her young voice breaking through the quiet reverence of the crowd. Her laughter brought more smiles from strangers who had tears shining in their eyes. Oliver laughed too, though his voice trembled. "I'm walking," he whispered, almost in disbelief. After several slow steps, his legs buckled slightly and he nearly fell. His mother gasped, but before she could reach out, Thomas's hand steadied him. The guard's grip was firm yet gentle, like an anchor keeping him upright. "Easy," Thomas said calmly. "You're safe. Keep going if you can, or rest if you need to. Both are victories." Oliver looked up, his eyes full of fire. "I want to keep going." And so he did. With shaky determination, he walked a few more steps until he reached the middle of the courtyard. The applause grew louder now, though still respectful, like the sound of hearts beating together. Even some of the guards, who had remained stoic at their posts, allowed their eyes to flicker toward the boy, their discipline nearly breaking under the weight of the moment. At last, Oliver reached the spot where his mother knelt waiting, her arms open wide. With a final push of courage, he stepped into her embrace. She caught him, lifting him slightly as she kissed his forehead and whispered through her tears, "You've made me the happiest mother in the world." His father bent low, wrapping his arms around them both. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said, his voice thick with pride. Oliver's sister hugged them tightly, her small arms wrapping around her brother as she cried, "You're my hero, Ollie." The crowd could no longer contain themselves. They applauded loudly now, many of them crying openly, their faces shining with emotion. Some raised their cameras again, not to capture a performance but to remember a miracle. Parents in the crowd bent to tell their children, "This is what courage looks like." Thomas took a single step back, standing tall once again in his uniform. His expression returned to its calm, firm state, but his eyes shone with something deeper, quiet pride. He raised his hand to his brow and gave Oliver a sharp salute. The gesture was small but powerful, an honor rarely given to anyone outside the military. Oliver looked up, his eyes wide. He understood the meaning even if no one had explained it to him. The guard was treating him as an equal, as someone who had earned respect. The boy's small hand lifted shakily to his forehead, returning the salute in his own clumsy way. The crowd cheered louder than ever, the sound rolling like thunder across the palace gates. His mother's tears flowed harder at the sight. She whispered into her son's ear, "You are more than I ever dreamed. You are strong. You are brave. You are my miracle." The boy's father closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control his emotions, but he could not stop the tears that fell freely down his cheeks. He placed a hand over Oliver's heart and said, "This strength will always be with you. Don't ever forget what you did today." The guard stepped back into place, his boots clicking against the stone as he resumed his duty. To the casual eye, it was as if nothing had happened. But for Oliver and his family, and for every single witness in that crowd, life had changed forever. People began to whisper among themselves again, but this time their words carried reverence. "I've never seen anything like it," one said. "This will stay with me forever," said another. Tourists who had come to take pictures of soldiers left with something far more valuable, a story of hope they would carry home and tell for the rest of their lives. Oliver sat back in his wheelchair at last. His small body exhausted but his spirit soaring, he leaned against his mother's arm and whispered, "I walked, Mama." His mother kissed his cheek again, smiling through her tears. "Yes, you did, and you will always remember this day." The boy's eyes sparkled as he looked once more at the guard standing tall at his post. His small voice whispered, "Thank you." Though Thomas did not turn his head or break his pose, he heard the words. Deep inside, beneath the layers of training and tradition, his heart swelled with quiet pride. He had not only guarded the palace that day, he had guarded a dream, and in doing so helped it come alive. And as the family sat together, wrapped in each other's arms, their tears flowed not from sadness but from joy. They had all been changed forever by a single act of kindness, a single choice of courage over silence. The courtyard that day had seen many ceremonies, but none so powerful as the sight of a boy taking his first steps into hope, leaving everyone who witnessed it with tears in their eyes. That night, long after the applause had faded and the palace gates had closed to tourists, Oliver and his family sat together in their small hotel room in London. The day had been filled with so many emotions that it hardly seemed real. Oliver's legs were tired, his body sore, but his spirit was brighter than it had ever been. He sat on the bed with his sister beside him, both of them replaying every moment over and over in their minds. His parents sat nearby, still overwhelmed, their eyes red from tears but glowing with pride. Oliver looked at his mother with a smile that refused to leave his face. "Mama, I walked today," he whispered, as if he needed to hear the words himself to believe them. His mother reached over and cupped his cheek, her own eyes filling with fresh tears. "Yes, you did, sweetheart," she said softly. "You walked and the whole world saw your courage." His father leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Do you know what you did today, son? You showed not only yourself but all of us that nothing is impossible when you believe. You changed how I see everything. You showed me strength in its purest form." Oliver's sister, still buzzing with excitement, jumped in. "And you're famous now, Ollie. Did you see all those people taking videos and pictures? Everyone will know how brave you are." She giggled but then hugged him tightly, whispering, "You're my hero." Oliver laughed softly, though his eyes shone with tears. "I don't feel like a hero," he said honestly. "I just wanted to try." His mother leaned closer and kissed his forehead. "And that's what makes you one. Heroes don't look for glory. They just take a step even when it's hard." The family sat together, holding each other as they relived the miracle. But outside their room, the story had already begun to spread. People from all over the world who had witnessed the moment were sharing it with friends, family, and strangers online. Videos of the boy in the wheelchair taking his first steps with the help of a royal guard began to circulate, bringing tears to countless eyes. The world, often filled with stories of hardship, was hungry for a story of hope, and Oliver had given them one. Back at Buckingham Palace, Thomas stood once again in his quarters, removing his heavy uniform piece by piece. His body was tired from the long day of standing guard, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He sat on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Oliver's smile in his mind. He had broken protocol, something he had sworn not to do, but for once he felt that it had been the right choice. Sometimes rules protected traditions, but kindness protected the human spirit, and Thomas knew which one mattered more that day. As the days passed, Oliver's life began to change in small but powerful ways. His parents arranged new therapy sessions, this time filled with fresh hope rather than resignation. The therapists, inspired by the story, pushed him gently, encouraging him to build on the miracle he had shown the world. Oliver's steps remained wobbly, and walking was still painfully difficult, but he no longer saw his wheelchair as a prison. It was part of him, yes, but now he knew it did not define him. Every night before bed, Oliver would whisper to himself, "I walked. I can do it again." And slowly, little by little, he grew stronger. Sometimes he could take 2 steps, sometimes 3, sometimes only 1 before collapsing back into the chair. But he never gave up. The memory of that day at the palace lived in his heart like a fire that could never be put out. For his parents, the moment had also shifted their world. They no longer looked at their son with quiet sadness, but with admiration. They had always loved him deeply, but now they saw his courage shining brighter than his weakness. They began to tell him stories of great men and women who overcame difficulties, reminding him that he was now part of that tradition. "You are proof that miracles are real," his father told him one evening, holding him close. As weeks turned into months, the story of the little boy at the palace continued to inspire. Teachers shared it with their students, parents told it to their children, and strangers across the world found hope in the simple courage of a child and the kindness of a soldier. For some, it was just a story, but for Oliver, it was the start of a new chapter in his life. One afternoon, months later, the family returned to London for a follow-up medical appointment. Oliver's progress had been slow but steady, and his doctors were surprised at the improvements. His mother suggested visiting the palace again, just to relive the memory. As they stood once more outside the gates, Oliver wheeled himself forward eagerly, his eyes scanning the guards. And then, as if fate had planned it, Thomas was there again, standing tall in his uniform. He did not look at them directly. After all, he was on duty. But when his eyes flickered toward Oliver, a small spark of recognition shone through. Oliver smiled widely, raising his small hand in a shaky salute. Thomas, without moving a muscle from his position, gave the faintest nod, the tiniest acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. Oliver's mother wiped her eyes, whispering, "He remembers you." Oliver nodded proudly. "And I remember him. He helped me believe." That night back at the hotel, Oliver sat at the window looking out at the glowing city. His sister curled beside him, asking, "What are you thinking about, Ollie?" He smiled softly. "I'm thinking about the steps I'll take tomorrow and the day after that. One day maybe I'll walk to the palace gates on my own. And when I do, I'll salute him again." His sister hugged him tightly. "And we'll all be there to cheer for you." The family watched their son with renewed hope, knowing that no matter what struggles lay ahead, he had already achieved something greater than they had ever imagined. He had shown them all that courage could turn the impossible into reality. And so the memory of that day remained etched not only in their hearts, but in the hearts of everyone who had seen it. A boy in a wheelchair had taken his first steps, and a royal guard had chosen compassion over silence. It was more than a moment, it was a legacy. For Oliver, life would never be the same. He might face setbacks, he might fall, but he had already proven that he could rise. And for his family, the tears they shed at the palace gates were not just tears of joy, but tears of transformation. They had seen their son's courage come alive, and it would carry them forward forever. The story of that day lived on, told and retold, always ending the same way, with a boy's laughter, a mother's tears, and a soldier's salute. And though Buckingham Palace had seen centuries of history, none of its ceremonies could compare to the day when a small boy in a wheelchair took his first steps, leaving his family and everyone who witnessed it in tears of joy.